She told everyone I was obsessed, unstable, even dangerous. What she didn't know? I kept everything she ever sent me. And with one tap, I ended the story she thought she controlled. You won't want to miss this story. But before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a video like this one. I'm Tessa McKinley, 31, and up until 6 months ago, I genuinely believed I was surrounded by a tribe of women who loved me like blood. Not perfect friendships, none of us were saints, but the kind built over years of birthdays, breakups, job changes, and bottomless brunches where we laughed until someone snorted mimosa. We'd seen each other through panic attacks, weddings, and one particularly awful UTI scare in Cancun. These were not surface-level connections. These were group chats that never stopped buzzing, 2 a.m. voice notes when anxiety hit, handwritten cards on hard days, and inside jokes so layered they needed their own glossary. Or so I thought. When things started unraveling, it wasn't all at once. That's the cruel thing about social exile. It's not an explosion. It's erosion. The first sign was Amanda leaving my text on read. Nothing unusual on its own, people get busy. But then Jules canceled our Saturday market plans with a vague, "something came up," and didn't offer to reschedule. Then it was Brittany quietly untagging herself from a photo I posted. Small, subtle things that could each be explained away. But the pattern grew. The group chat went from constant chatter to silence. Except when I spoke, then suddenly they all had something better to do. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe they were all going through something, that I was being needy. I didn't want to seem paranoid or clingy, so I said nothing. But something in my stomach curled tighter every day, like my body knew before my brain caught up. I kept checking my phone compulsively, the way you do when you've sent a risky text and are waiting for the fallout, except I hadn't sent anything at all. It wasn't just the absence of affection, it was the presence of discomfort. When we were together, which became rare, they smiled too much, complimented things they never used to notice, laughed at stories that didn't land. It was the kind of performance people put on when they've already decided to leave but haven't figured out how to exit. Still, I held on. Until I ran into Bethany at Target, barely more than a brunch acquaintance, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her voice wobbled as she asked how I was, her eyes darting like she wanted to be anywhere else. Then she said something that stayed lodged in my brain. "You seem good." I wasn't sure after everything Marissa said. And there it was, a name, a crack in the wall, Marissa. My closest friend, my emergency contact, my keeper of secrets, the one who knew where all the bodies were buried. I walked away, smiling politely, but my ears were ringing. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat with my phone in my lap like it was a bomb. Something had been said, something untrue, and now I needed to find out what. Because if Marissa had turned the group against me, I wasn't just hurt, I was done. Marissa still smiled at me like she always had, like everything was fine, like I hadn't spent the last 3 weeks spiraling, dissecting conversations, wondering why the people I loved were treating me like a cracked mirror they didn't want to look into. Her smile hadn't changed, it was all teeth and effortless charm, the kind of expression that made waiters remember her name and strangers feel like they'd known her for years. But something in her eyes betrayed her. A flicker, a pause too long, like her face forgot the script for half a second before catching up. We ran into each other at a coffee shop we used to haunt every Sunday, back when our lives were synced so tightly we finished each other's orders. I was already walking out with my latte when she breezed in like a perfectly timed ghost. "Tess," she said with that familiar warmth, like she hadn't been silent for weeks, like she hadn't vanished from my birthday dinner without a word, hadn't laughed at something in the group chat and ignored the photo I sent of my dog in a birthday hat. I played along, because that's what women like us are trained to do, smile back, keep the tone light, never let them see you bleed. But my gut curled like burned paper. Something was off. She asked about work, about my parents, about the new house I'd moved into 3 months ago that she hadn't once visited. Her questions were breezy, but there was a performative edge to them, like she was running through a checklist. I wanted to believe she was just busy. I wanted to believe we'd just drifted a little, like people do. But I'd been holding on to that hope like a rope around my neck, and standing in that coffee shop, watching her act like nothing had changed, I finally felt the slack snap. Her phone buzzed mid-conversation, And for just a second, I caught a glimpse of our old group chat on her screen, only it wasn't our group chat anymore. It was renamed, a different emoji. And my name was nowhere in sight. The blood drained from my face, but she didn't notice or pretended not to. I excused myself before my voice betrayed the storm inside me, smiling tightly as I left, coffee forgotten in my hand. As I walked back to my car, my fingers trembled around my keys, not from fear, but from a sense of clarity so sharp it hurt. She'd crafted this whole thing, this soft ghosting, this careful rebranding of me as the outsider. And I'd been giving her the benefit of the doubt while she carved my name out of our circle, like a surgeon removing something sick. But now I'd seen it, the look in her eye, the group chat I wasn't in, the smile that didn't reach, and I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a performance. And I'd just become the punchline to a joke I never agreed to. I started doing that thing where you gaslight yourself before anyone else has the chance, where you rewrite the scene in your head just to make the sting feel less intentional. Maybe they were all just overwhelmed. Maybe I hadn't been reaching out enough. Maybe I'd missed some subtle signal that I was supposed to pull back, give space, wait for them to come around. I kept making excuses for them, spinning new ones every day like a sad little carousel that wouldn't stop turning. I'd see their posts laughing at brunch, dressing up for themed parties, tagging each other in memes we all used to share, and I'd double tap with shaky fingers like I was still part of something, even when the silence on my end screamed otherwise. When even Amanda, who once texted me good morning like it was a sacred ritual, stopped responding entirely. I told myself she must be going through something. But the truth kept peeking through the cracks, cruel and undeniable. My birthday arrived like a test I didn't want to take, and I held my breath until noon, waiting for the avalanche of messages that never came. Not a single one, not even a lazy HBD from Jules. I spent the day pretending I didn't care, eating cake alone in my apartment with candles that fizzled out faster than my hope. That night, I deleted the Instagram story I'd posted, the one with the balloon and the caption, "Another trip around the sun," because what's more pathetic than broadcasting your own celebration and being met with silence? The ache settled into something heavier. Not heartbreak, because that at least implies something mutual. No, this felt like a quiet suffocation, like being in a room full of people who refuse to look at you. I scrolled through old texts like a widow clutching love letters, rereading messages from months ago where we'd made plans, shared secrets, joked about stupid things only we understood. The more I looked, the clearer the before and after became some invisible line where everything shifted and I hadn't noticed until it was too late. They hadn't just drifted, they had exiled me. Slowly. Strategically. And the worst part was, they'd done it so cleanly that I didn't even have the satisfaction of a fight. No betrayal to scream about. Just this dull, aching erasure. I'd become the girl they used to know. A footnote. A story they maybe still tell, but only when they need a cautionary tale. I curled up on my couch with the television humming in the background and let the tears fall without trying to stop them. Not because I was broken, but because I finally realized I was mourning something no one else even acknowledged had died. The grief wasn't for the loss, it was for the way they let me disappear without ever saying goodbye. It was one of those nights you don't plan. The kind that begins with, "I just need one drink," and ends with your mascara smudged and your heart cracked open on a bar stool. Emily was the only one who hadn't fully vanished. The last thread of connection I was still holding on to like a lifeline, even if our once daily chats had whittled down to the occasional meme or check-in. So when she texted me out of nowhere, "Drinks tonight? My treat?" I jumped at it, desperate for any version of normal. We met at a quiet little rooftop bar, the kind with fairy lights and overpriced cocktails that make you feel fancier than you are. At first, everything felt fine, comfortable even. We eased into conversation like old times, laughing about work, roasting our exes, comparing notes on terrible dating app bios. I could almost pretend that nothing had changed. But then came drink number 3, and the edges of Emily's words started to blur. Her voice slowed, got heavier, like it was dragging something behind it. She stared into her glass for a long time, then looked up at me with this almost apologetic softness that made my stomach flip. "Tess," she said quietly, like she was afraid of being overheard even though no one was listening. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I feel like you deserve to know." I braced myself. not knowing what was coming but already certain it would hurt. Marissa, she's been telling people things about you for a while now. I didn't speak, just stared, waiting for the blade to drop. She said you've been unstable, that you text her nonstop, show up places uninvited. She told Jules you were having a breakdown. She said you were dangerous. The word hit like a slap. Dangerous. Like I was some threat, a ticking bomb, a headline waiting to happen. I couldn't even process it all at once. My breath caught in my throat. She said I was what? I asked, my voice barely audible over the music. Emily nodded slowly, eyes wide with something that looked like shame. I didn't believe it at first. But then people started acting weird, and I didn't know what to think. I'm so sorry, Tess. I should have said something sooner. I don't remember much after that, just the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears and the way the city lights blurred through tears I didn't want her to see. On the outside, I nodded and smiled and paid for our next round like I wasn't unraveling. But inside, I was drowning in betrayal. Marissa hadn't just turned them against me, she'd rewritten the narrative entirely. And I'd been walking around like maybe they were just busy, like maybe I was overthinking it. But now I knew. She hadn't ghosted me. She'd ghostwritten me, turned me into a cautionary tale in a story I never got to tell. Emily didn't mean to keep talking. She kept glancing down like the table might swallow her whole, but once the dam cracked, the truth came pouring out like dirty water from a broken pipe. She said it started subtly, little comments Marissa would make when I wasn't around. A raised eyebrow when someone asked where I was. A sigh and a carefully vague, "She's dealing with a lot right now." Then it escalated quiet warnings behind closed doors, whispered concern masked as compassion. She told the group that I was obsessive, that I fixated on people, that I couldn't handle rejection. She said I'd shown up at her work unannounced, though I hadn't been near her office in over a year. She claimed I'd flooded her inbox with messages, that I called at all hours of the night, and once, that I'd left a cryptic note on her windshield, which, for the record, never happened. But the way Emily described it, Marissa made it all sound so believable. And why wouldn't it be? I'd been quiet, isolated, visibly unraveling in the background while Marissa kept up her perfectly curated image of the concerned friend trying to support someone difficult. She fed them just enough truth to make the lies digestible. Yes, I had texted Marissa a few too many times when she first started ghosting me, but it was out of confusion, not obsession. Yes, I'd cried on the phone to her once when I was overwhelmed, but not because I was unstable, because she was the one person I thought I could trust. And yet she twisted every moment, every vulnerability, into ammunition. Emily said she had tried to stay neutral at first, to give both of us the benefit of the doubt, but that neutrality had slowly turned into distance. It was easier, she admitted, to believe her. She was so calm about it, so convincing, and I understood because Marissa had always known how to perform sincerity. She was the kind of person who could cry without tears and make it look real, who could say, "I'm just worried about her," while sharpening the knife behind her back. I listened in silence as Emily traced the web Marissa had spun, strand by sticky strand, the casual defamation, the seeds of doubt, the way she'd turned a tight-knit group into a jury, with herself as the key witness, and I was the defendant who never even knew I was on trial. It hit me then not just the betrayal, but the sheer calculation of it. Marissa hadn't drifted away from me. She had erased me, methodically and completely, and replaced me with a version of myself that only existed in her imagination. And the worst part? No one had questioned it. They had all believed her. Believed that I was unstable, unhinged, dangerous, all because the villain told a better story than the girl she pushed into the dark. It was around 2 in the morning when I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, laptop open, wine untouched, and a fire in my chest that burned hotter than grief. I hadn't planned to go digging, but Emily's words were still echoing in my head, and suddenly I was possessed by the need to find proof not for them, but for myself. Because for months, I'd been questioning my memory, wondering if maybe I had been too intense, too needy, too much. But as I scrolled back through the years of messages, screenshots, and voice notes, the truth stared back at me in her own words. Marissa had been the one to initiate everything every 3 a.m. phone call about her latest meltdown, every frantic voice memo when she thought someone at work was out to get her, every desperate text asking me to cancel my plans and come over because she couldn't breathe and needed someone to talk her down. There were long message threads where she begged me to lie for her, to pretend she hadn't said something cruel to Amanda, to cover for her when she bailed on Jules's bachelorette weekend. I had always done it without hesitation, like it was part of the silent contract of best friendship, be her vault, her shield, her scapegoat when necessary. And now she was spinning it all as if I had been chasing her like some deranged fan. I found a video from 2 years ago, Marissa on my couch, mascara streaked, wine in hand, laughing as she confessed to flirting with Amanda's boyfriend. Just to prove she could, she made me swear not to tell anyone. I trust you with everything, she slurred. You're my ride or die. I had been, but she'd clearly found a new ride, and apparently I was the one left to die. The receipts were endless screenshots of her calling me her lifeline, emails where she vented to me about every friend in the group she now stood beside like we were strangers. She had weaponized my silence, my loyalty, and buried me beneath a pile of her own lies. But what she forgot, what she clearly didn't count on, was that I never delete anything. Not out of paranoia, just habit. I was the friend who remembered birthdays, who saved photos, who archived group trip itineraries, and made spreadsheets for holidays. I didn't think these files would ever be anything more than nostalgia. But now they were evidence cold, damning, time-stamped truth. And as I sat there, surrounded by the glow of my laptop and the dim realization that I had been rewritten into a villain in someone else's story, I felt the shift in my spine. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't the problem. I was the one who kept the receipts while the queen of manipulation got too drunk on her own lies to remember who she sent them to. And now, I finally knew what to do with them. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The glow of my laptop cast this cold, bluish light across the room, and I sat in it like a woman possessed, scrolling back through years of messages, voice notes, photos, and the kind of digital crumbs that, when viewed all at once, make a person's true character impossible to ignore. My hands were shaking, not from shock anymore, but from something deeper rage blooming like a bruise you can't hide. Not just because she lied. Not just because she convinced an entire circle of friends to question my sanity while she wrapped herself in the halo of victimhood, but because I had let her. I had stood there, arms outstretched, a landing pad for every emotional crisis she ever had, while she climbed higher off my support, only to use that height to paint me into a villain. And I'd helped her. I'd held the ladder steady while she turned our history into a weapon. I read every old message like it was part of a trial I didn't know I was on her, saying she needed me, thanking me for saving her again, confessing to stirring up drama just to feel alive, then turning around and casting me as the toxic one. I found a note I'd written on my phone 2 years ago, just a grocery list, at first glance, until you looked closer and saw the margin filled with things to remember for Marissa. Pick up her dry cleaning. Remind her to call her mom. Text her good luck before big presentation. Little things I did instinctively, because when you love someone, even platonically, you carry their burdens without keeping score. But she had kept score. Or maybe not score, maybe just a tally of when I stopped serving her, when I started slipping from her control, when I stopped showing up exactly the way she wanted and started asking for reciprocity. That's when the story shifted. That's when I went from Tess is my ride or die to Tess is obsessed with me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. I had turned myself inside out for someone who rewrote me as unstable the moment it was convenient. And I realized that the worst part wasn't even losing the group, or the years of friendship I thought we had. It was realizing that I had let it happen, that I had stayed quiet, that I had accepted less than the bare minimum and called it loyalty. The tears that came weren't soft, they were furious, hot, silent sobs that curled my body forward, like something inside me was physically breaking. Because it was. The illusion was gone, the narrative shattered. And all that remained was me bare, betrayed, and no longer willing to pretend that love had ever lived in a place where I had to shrink just to be tolerated. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not cruelty, not vengeance, just resolve. I wasn't going to be her shadow anymore. I was going to set the record straight. The group chat was still there, tucked between my family thread and a work Slack notification I never bothered to clear. The Coven, that's what we'd named it back when we thought we were clever witches, casting spells with our eyeliner and sarcasm, when late-night voice notes and meme exchanges made us feel like a chosen sisterhood. I hadn't opened it in weeks, maybe months. I think part of me assumed it had gone dead the way old group chats do, fizzling out as life moved on, until that night, when I sat alone with my laptop and wine gone warm, and tapped the icon out of some half-drunk mix of curiosity and masochism. And there it was, threads and threads of messages, photos, inside jokes, dinner plans, shared Spotify links, none of which included me. My name hadn't come up once. Not even a "Tess would love this song," not even a ghost of my presence lingering in their conversations. But the part that gutted me wasn't just the absence, it was the fact that the chat had been renamed. New icon, new title. Sisters, no spells needed. Cute, clean, erased. I scrolled slowly, not even knowing what I was hoping to find. Maybe a message defending me. Maybe someone asking where I'd gone. Maybe something. But it was like I'd been surgically removed. Like I never existed at all. And then I saw it. A small gray line. You were removed from the chat. The timestamp was 2 days after my birthday. 2 days after I sat alone, wondering why no one had even texted me. My chest tightened with a kind of betrayal that didn't scream, it whispered, cold and steady. I hadn't left. I hadn't stormed out. I had been removed, silenced, cut out like an infection, while they went on pretending nothing had happened. I clicked on the old media tab and scrolled through the memories, the Halloween costumes we coordinated, the screenshots of text convos with bad Tinder dates, the blurry videos of drunk karaoke where I was laughing so hard I fell off the couch, proof that I was there, that I mattered, at least once, but now I was just gone. And the thing about being excluded that way, so deliberately, is that it doesn't feel like grief, it feels like shame. Like you were a joke, and no one told you. Like you showed up to a costume party in full makeup only to realize it's black tie. I closed the chat. Not out of defeat, but because I finally understood the assignment. They weren't just being passive. They had made a choice. And what they forgot, what Marissa forgot, was that the version of me she'd tried to bury was still breathing. Still watching. Still holding on to everything she sent me when I was the one she leaned on. The group chat might have silenced me, but the truth? The truth was about to speak louder than they ever imagined. I spent the next 2 nights like a woman possessed, hunched over my laptop and phone with the grim focus of someone piecing together a crime scene, and, in a way, I was. The crime wasn't loud, didn't leave bruises, didn't show up on security footage. It was slow and silent and smiling with teeth. I scrolled back years through conversations I hadn't dared to revisit, heart thudding harder with every swipe. Screenshot, save, repeat. There it was, Marissa flirting with Amanda's boyfriend in early 2021, sending a late-night selfie with the caption, "Bet he'd pick me if he wasn't scared of boring little Amanda." Screenshot. A week later, her gleeful confession. "I love making people uncomfortable. It's like a game. Is that bad?" Screenshot. Then the voice memo where she cried about Jules's engagement, slurring through tequila tears because she couldn't believe Jules, of all people, was getting married first. I mean, come on. She still thinks graphic tees are fashion. Screenshot. I found a message where she begged me not to tell anyone she'd spread a rumor about Emily sleeping with her boss. I swear I didn't mean for it to get out. Please just help me fix it. And one where she planned to fake a panic attack to get out of babysitting her niece. Screenshot. It wasn't just the cruelty that hit me, it was how much of it I'd witnessed in real time and excused as stress, or bad days, or emotional immaturity. I had been her safe place, her confessional booth, her storage unit for guilt and dirt, and secrets too ugly for public view, and I had held them all, thinking that's what friendship was. But now, with the full scope laid bare in front of me, I realized she hadn't just used me, she'd depended on me to absorb the worst of her and still make her look like the golden girl. And when I stopped doing that, when I needed support instead of giving it, she rewrote the story and cast me as the villain. I found messages where she praised me, called me her soul sister, her ride or die, The only one who really got her, followed weeks later by cold silences and accusations whispered to others when I wasn't there to defend myself. Screenshot. I saved them all folder after folder, organized by name, date, context. Not out of revenge. Not yet. It was about clarity, about dragging the truth into the light, about proving to myself that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the gaslight flickering. I even found a note she wrote me on my birthday 2 years ago, calling me her anchor, and swearing that no matter what happened, I'd always have her. I saved that too, because it mattered once, and because when the moment came to tell the truth, I wanted her to hear her own words echoing back at her, louder than the lies she told to drown me out. It was a Tuesday, around 6:40 p.m., when I saw the story that turned a simmer into a boil. I'd just gotten home from work, still in my blazer, half listening to the microwave hum, when the notification lit up my screen like a warning flare. Marissa had posted. Not unusual, her stories were a steady stream of curated chaos, the kind of cryptic quotes and filtered selfies meant to stir attention without ever looking like she needed it. But this one was different. A blurry shot of her wine glass and a single line in white text. Some people really do imagine whole relationships in their head. Scary. No name, no tags, but it didn't have to. Everyone who knew us, everyone who had been pulled into the gravity of her lies, would recognize exactly who it was aimed at. It was the kind of subtweet in story form that only works if there's a shared understanding and judging by the flurry of laughing emojis and replies I could see from mutuals in the comment section. That understanding was loud and clear. My stomach twisted, not with confusion, but with the kind of searing clarity that feels like betrayal slicing clean through scar tissue. She had framed me, again, as the unstable one, the clingy ex-friend who'd created a fantasy in my head and spun it into obsession. She'd reduced our years of history, our sleepovers, our breakdowns, our 3 a.m. cries over heartbreak into a delusion I supposedly conjured up in some lonely spiral. And her audience? They ate it up. People who once asked me for advice, who sent me selfies before dates, who swore I was the glue of the group, now heart-reacting to a public takedown wrapped in plausible deniability. I stared at the screen in stunned silence, reading the sentence over and over like maybe it would change. But it didn't. And then I felt it. The snap. The final break in the thread I'd been holding on to far too long. I had let her tell her version. I had let them believe it. I had held back out of decency, out of some hollow hope that the people I loved would eventually see through her shine. But this was the line. A public narrative crafted to humiliate me while she sipped wine and watched the comments roll in. I closed the app without reacting, without screenshotting it, because I didn't need to. I had enough. Enough proof, enough truth, enough pain to burn through every falsehood she'd built. She wanted an audience? Fine, she'd get one. But this time, I wouldn't be the ghost in the story. I'd be the one holding the receipts, and the next chapter wouldn't be vague. It would be surgical, precise, undeniable. Because if she wanted to talk about imagined stories well, I was about to show everyone exactly what reality looked like. In her words, in her voice, without the filter. I didn't argue. I didn't play into her theater. I didn't craft some long-winded clapback or post a subtweet of my own. I didn't even blink. I just opened the folder, the one I'd been building quietly, methodically, like a museum of every whispered lie and private confession she'd once trusted me with, back when I was her vault and her alibi. I selected 5 screenshots, not the most damning ones, not the ones that would nuke her life in a single blast just enough to fracture the mask she wore so flawlessly. Her saying she flirted with Amanda's boyfriend, just for fun because Amanda needed humbling. Her complaining about Jules' wedding, saying she hoped the catering gave everyone food poisoning. Her begging me to lie to cover up a story she twisted. Her mocking Emily's panic attacks as performative drama. And the kicker, her voice note, sweet and slurred, saying, "Tess is the only one I trust." The rest of them would eat each other if I let them. No introduction, no caption, no emojis. Just the truth, time-stamped and sharp, dropped like glass onto the concrete floor of the group chat I'd once lived in. The coven reborn without me, renamed to erase me. I didn't check who was online. I didn't wait to see who read it first. I hit send 5 times, one after the other, and then I locked my phone and set it face down on the counter like it might catch fire. For a moment, the silence around me stretched so tightly it felt like the whole apartment might snap. I poured myself a glass of water, walked to the window, and stared out at the city lights like I wasn't waiting for the world to shift under my feet. But I was, because it had to. Because when you've been painted a villain long enough, you stop trying to explain and start letting the facts speak louder than the fiction. My heart pounded like I'd just stepped off a ledge, but it wasn't fear. It was release. It was reclamation. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to justify. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had let her run the story for so long that the silence had started to feel like safety, when really it was just suffocation. But not anymore. I wasn't giving them a version of events to believe. I was giving them her own words, her own cruelty, her own voice, handed back like a mirror. I didn't need applause. I didn't even need vindication. I just wanted the room to go quiet. And sure enough, when I finally picked up my phone and opened the chat again, the typing dots had already begun to flicker. One tap. That's all it took. No fury. No drama, just precision. Just the truth. And once it was out, there was no stuffing it back in the pretty little box she'd kept it in. Marissa had started the fire. I just turned on the lights. The silence after I dropped the screenshots into the chat was thick and absolute, like the moment after a plate shatters on a tiled floor when everyone freezes, processing the sound, the mess, the implications. For a long, stretching minute, there was nothing. No replies, no reactions, just my heart thudding in my chest, like a war drum. Then it came. The first message, hesitant and sharp. Wait, what is this? Sent by Jules. Then a ripple. Hold on, is this Marissa? From Emily. Then another, and another, like a dam bursting one crack at a time. Amanda chimed in next, her tone unmistakably furious, even in plain text. That last one is about me, isn't it? No one had tagged Marissa yet, but the spotlight had already found her. More typing bubbles blinked into view, vanishing and reappearing like nervous breaths. Screenshots of my screenshots began to circulate again, this time with their commentary. I remember this night she told me you just didn't show. She said you were stalking her? What the actual hell? The betrayal settled in the room like smoke, clinging to every message, choking whatever grace she thought she had left. And still, Marissa said nothing. Not a single defense. No denial. No apology, not even one of her infamous non-answers masked as concern. Just her name, sitting silently in the chat while her lies unraveled in real time. Someone dropped a screenshot from her story. Some people really do imagine whole relationships in their head. Scary. And asked flatly, was this about Tess? The pause that followed was longer than it should have been, long enough to answer the question on its own. And then, finally, a reply. Marissa, I think this is all being taken out of context. But the thing about screenshots is they don't need context when the tone is clear, when the cruelty is documented, when your voice is the one confirming every accusation. Emily replied first, surprisingly blunt. That voice note wasn't out of context. That was you, unfiltered, Amanda added. You made us feel sorry for you while talking shit behind all our backs. Even Jules, who had always played the diplomat, wrote, I defended you. I believed you when you said Tess was spiraling. And now I feel sick. I watched it all unfold, sitting cross-legged on my couch, blanket clutched like armor, the light from my phone washing over my face like a slow sunrise. This wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about truth. And the truth had teeth. Marissa tried to spin it. Of course she did. It was a joke. You don't know how hard things have been for me. I didn't mean it like that. But the thread had snapped. The performance was over. And one by one, the women she'd manipulated, turned against, used, and weaponized against each other, began to see her not as the victim, but as the architect. And all I had to do was sit back and let her own words finish what she started. Marissa unraveled the way a polished gift box does when you tug the wrong ribbon fast, chaotic, and louder than you'd expect for something so carefully wrapped. Within an hour of the screenshots detonating the group chat, she was in full crisis mode. switching tactics like outfits, trying to find one that would stick. First, it was denial, claiming the voice notes were edited, the messages old jokes, and the screenshots taken out of context. But the problem with the truth is that it doesn't require a filter to be understood. Her voice was her voice. Her words were her words. And no amount of panic-stained backpedaling could disguise the venom she had so casually spewed when she thought no one else would ever hear it. Then came the next phase, self-pity. She posted a black screen to her story with white text, always her favorite aesthetic when pretending to be deep and broken. Mental health is not a game. Please be kind. Everyone's fighting a battle you can't see. The comments, once filled with heart emojis and queen replies, were noticeably sparse. A few sympathizers showed up, mostly distant followers who didn't know what had happened and assumed she was being bullied. But the people who mattered, the ones she'd lied to, used, or manipulated, were silent. Or worse, they were gone. By midday, Amanda had unfollowed her. Emily, too. Then Jules posted a quote about people who weaponize vulnerability and tagged nobody, but everyone knew. The cracks in Marissa's armor became chasms. By that evening, she had removed all her tagged photos, including ones we'd taken on our trip to New Orleans, back when we shared beds and secrets, and she still called me her ride or die. She deleted the story. Then, another post disappeared. Then, without fanfare or final words, her entire account vanished, gone, like she'd never existed, like the ghost of her own curated perfection had swallowed her whole. I didn't celebrate. There was no smug satisfaction, no fist pump, no performative gloating. Just a strange, quiet stillness, like the eye of a storm that had passed after months of hovering overhead. Watching someone self-destruct isn't gratifying when you once held their hand through their worst nights. It's not revenge when it feels more like grief. But grief doesn't erase justice, and justice doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it sits cross-legged on the floor of your apartment, hair messy, phone dimmed, knowing you finally stopped being their scapegoat. She could claim context, timing, fragility. But context doesn't lie. Voice memos don't lie. People do. And for once, the lies didn't win. Marissa, the girl who built a kingdom on charisma and chaos, who danced through social circles like fire through dry grass, had finally run out of oxygen. And all it took was her own matches, lit in the dark, left smoldering in the hands of the one person she thought would never strike back. I didn't burn her down. I just stopped shielding her from the spark. The apologies came in slow, scattered waves, like rain falling long after the storm's already passed late, lukewarm, and too quiet to matter the way they think it does. Emily messaged first, of course, trying to edge her way back in with a voice note that opened with a shaky breath and closed with, "I just feel so awful now." She said she should have trusted her gut, should have pushed back when things didn't add up, should have spoken to me instead of swallowing what Marissa fed her in perfect, poisoned spoonfuls. I listened to her words, nodding silently like she could see me, but didn't reply. Then Amanda texted, a 3-paragraph novella that started with, "I don't even know where to begin," and ended with, "You didn't deserve that." She said she never meant to hurt me, that she was trying to keep the peace in the group, that she didn't realize her silence was complicity until it was too late. She called me strong, like that was a compliment, like strength is something we should celebrate in the women we abandon. I read it twice. I didn't answer. Jules followed next, shorter, more sincere. Just a simple, "I'm sorry, I let you down." And she had. They all had. But the thing no one understood, not even after all of this, was that it wasn't just about Marissa. It wasn't just about the lies or the manipulation or the smear campaign dressed up as concern. It was about the fact that when she lit the match, they didn't even blink. They watched me burn and assumed I'd set the fire myself. They left me alone in a version of my life that had been edited without my consent, cut out of scenes I helped write, and blamed for a plot twist I didn't author. And now, with the villain exposed and the audience cleared out, they wanted to return to the story like I'd just been on pause. But I wasn't the same girl they ghosted. I wasn't the background character they once praised for being chill, for being supportive, for being the glue. I was the one who survived their silence, Who kept receipts when their loyalty expired? Who told the truth when it was easier to disappear? Their apologies weren't unwelcome, they just didn't hold weight. Not because they weren't honest, but because they came too late to matter in the way they hoped. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want closure delivered in 3 neatly worded paragraphs. I wanted peace. And peace, I learned, is not something you get when people come crawling back. It's what you find when you stop waiting for them to. So I left their messages on read, not to punish, but to protect. Not to win, but to walk away. Because I knew now that my silence wasn't weakness. It was power, and I'd finally learned how to wield it. I never typed another word in the group chat. I didn't need to. There was a certain beauty in restraint, in choosing silence not because you're out of things to say, but because you've finally said everything that matters. The truth had been dragged into the light, bloody, raw, undeniable, and now it stood on its own, taller and louder than any apology or backpedal could ever hope to compete with. They kept the chat alive for a while, fumbling through awkward banter, trying to paint over the burn marks like the walls hadn't already caved in. I watched from the outside, not bitter, just done. They posted photos from brunch without me, captioned with hollow phrases like, "Healing vibes only," and "Stronger together." And for the first time, I didn't flinch. Because I had finally detached from the need to be understood by people who had never tried to know me in the first place. It wasn't about revenge, it never was. That was too small, too fleeting. This was about reclamation, about standing at the epicenter of a firestorm and realizing I'd survived it not by becoming something harder, but by staying exactly who I was when they tried to rewrite me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not my innocence, not my loyalty, not my sanity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unhinged. I wasn't imagining friendships that never existed. I had loved deeply, supported endlessly, and trusted stupidly, and those weren't flaws. They were evidence of character, of capacity, of the kind of person who doesn't fold just because someone else is afraid of being exposed. My peace didn't come in the form of a confrontation or a dramatic final word. It came in the quiet. In the mornings I woke up without checking my phone. In the hours I spent reading again, walking again, laughing with people who had nothing to gain from my pain. I cleared out old photos from my phone, not out of anger, but because I didn't need reminders of a life I no longer lived. I lit a candle in my apartment one night, sat in the soft flicker of its glow, and realized how much space I finally had. Inside me, around me. No more tiptoeing through conversations. No more dissecting silences. No more apologizing for taking up space in a narrative they tried to push me out of. Marissa would spin her stories to whoever still listened. That was her rhythm. But I'd changed the beat. I'd reclaimed my version, my voice, my place. And when you finally choose yourself after being erased, it doesn't look like revenge. It looks like peace, like walking away without looking back. Like silence that doesn't ache anymore. And in that silence, I found something no group chat could ever give me: freedom. The kind that doesn't need to be announced, just lived. So I lived it, quietly, fully, unapologetically. And that more than anything is what burned brighter than the fire they tried to drown me in.